Hey, hello! Welcome to BlinkOn, too, in Europe of all places. Nice to see you all. I'm very glad that so many people could make it so far away. We had started out planning this as a small conference, thinking that not many people would come, and then suddenly we hit our limit, and then we hit our limit again, and then we overhit our third limit, but we're glad that so many could make it. I'm Eric, as you may know me from many reviews. And this is Jochen, who's one of our leads in this side of the world. Again, thank you very much for coming. So we covered that. Welcome. I thought this was really interesting, so I put this up as a slide. We are a little over half Google, but we have a bunch of non-Googlers here this time, which is great. Way better than I think we did last time. So I'm really excited to hear all the interesting things you guys are working on.
Might be slightly better.
Did we conquer the technology?
No, that's fine now.
Okay. Very excited to learn what all the interesting things you guys are working on. Yeah. Anyways, I'm excited to be here. Can you tell?
So really, it's a conference for you, right? So we want to hear from you. It's really exciting to have that big fractions from outside of Google.
Okay. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the last 6 months. We're going to talk a little bit about what we foresee going on in the next 6 months. We're going to talk a lot about decision making and why and what we're thinking about. And then we're going to pose some questions and offer some answers, and hopefully we'll learn some answers in the next 2 days. So the last 6 months has been continued crazy growth. This is a graph showing the number of unique contributors per month to Blink. And the most interesting thing about this graph to me is that there is no dip when we forked a year ago. We continue to constantly add 5 or 10 contributors per month to the project. We continue to grow. This is great. In correspondence to this graph, which we showed last year, we dumped a ton of code when we forked, and amazingly, we have not gotten it back. We've been deleting code about as fast as we've been adding it. So that's really exciting to me. Yeah, so other things that have gone on in the last 6 months. We added the intent system about a year ago, and we started better tracking of the intents about 6 months ago, last November. Since that time, we've had 113 intents, most of which have not been from Google, most of which have been removing features. And you can see all the exact intents and the data and stuff over there.
And so I want to point out that the process of shipping something or removing something is still under development. So it's not supposed to be some kind of announcement process where we say what we decided beforehand, but the idea is really to have this discussion out there in the Blink community. And so it's fundamentally important for this process that it's still evolving. So if you have any kind of feedback, please give us the feedback. So if you want to participate in this process, you're more than welcome. Like the process is supposed to live on in the Blink community.
Yeah, we just updated our intent guidelines last week. So hopefully we'll have more discussion about that while we're here. So we also shipped a ton of stuff in the last 6 months, and this is just a random smattering. Interesting to me about this list is that, correctly, I believe it's been very mobile focused. You see a lot of CSS source set, touch-based stuff, fast text autosizer. These are all things that are mobile-only features, or mobile-mostly features, which is exciting to me. Yeah, I think that's most what I want to say about this slide. Another big piece is we've also been unshipping stuff.
And it turns out if you ship something, it might incur a huge cost, but you don't see it immediately because nobody uses it yet, right? So it might be a really bad idea to ship it. In contrast, if you remove something from the platform, the cost is immediate. Like you immediately break websites, and we had to learn a bit the hard way that even if we see low usage, we can't just rip out features from the platform. For example, for attribute nodes, we thought we could remove some parts of it that have little usage, but in fact, it had little benefit for us because we couldn't remove all of it, and the little we could remove had a lot of impact on certain websites. And for show model dialog, it's a similar story. So for us, it's a really bad feature. It has a huge cost on the code base, and it has lots of security problems. But it turns out that lots of enterprises are relying on this, and even though they're willing to move with us, they just need more time. So it's still a bit of an unsolved problem how to remove features like this. But on the positive side, for example, we made great progress removing the NP API, which has like huge usage all over the web, and still we managed to drive down the usage and will eventually drop it.
Or at least that's the plan. So we showed these slides when Adam and I spoke 6 months ago. This is sort of a random smattering of stuff that we foresaw, and you can see we've done a very good job of shipping a lot of it. That was near term. We also talked about medium term, which these things are more cooking through the system, and some crazy stuff. And we'll talk more about this kind of stuff. There are people who are holding sessions on all sorts of these topics, so go to the sessions to learn more. So that was the past. Let's talk about the future. So in the same vein, we have, not surprisingly, with 240 people contributing each month, we have a ton of stuff going on in Blink. What I think is interesting to talk about here, and we want to talk about briefly up here on stage, or whatever we call this, the stuff that affects everybody.
So, for example, OilPan is the project that tries to moves Blink from ref counting to a trace and garbage collector, and it's important to know about this because this will affect everybody, right? So this is a very cross-cutting project, and I just want to highlight a few other of these projects that will also affect everybody. So there's scheduling. Like in order to consistently hit 60 Hertz, we need to somehow solve scheduling. We can't just have some random task coming in and destroying the frame rate. There's an upcoming merge with the Chromium repository. Again, this will affect everybody. Like the code base will explode in size, right? The number of contributors will almost triple. Again, will affect everybody. Juice is it's a project about power consumption. So power consumption, again, is something which you cannot solve in isolation. It is something which the entire Blink team has to put focus on.
And again, these are just some of the things that are going on in the project that are worth highlighting. There are also some longer-term things that, again, are going to be talked about in sessions today. Again, mostly relate to mobile, but some that we should highlight. Our build system is potentially changing. There's the GIN project, the GN project is about rewriting, moving away from zip files to GIN files. Mojo is about rewriting the IPC system, which doesn't necessarily directly affect Blink, but is probably, you're going to see that go by. Big things like the out-of-process iframework, which is here remote frame. The concept of page is leaving Blink. That's moving to the embedder. That's going to affect your daily Blink hacking. GPU acceleration, just accommodating for the fact that these devices that we are now shipping more and more on are slow CPUs, decent GPUs, and we need to move more stuff there. Again, lots of stuff going on in the project. And of course, there's more speculative stuff and more than is listed on this, some of which is in progress, some of which will be talked about here at BlinkOn. So the meat of our talk is really, we want to talk about why. We want to talk about why we've been making the decisions that we have in the project, what our thoughts on where the project should go.
And so we realized that inside Google there's lots of all-hands-like events where we try to discuss back and forth what should be our direction we're going, what is our vision. Like leadership tries to build a common vision. But as a Blink team, you saw earlier that there's really large non-Google parts in the Blink team. We think it's important to share this vision with you and maybe explain a bit of why we decide to ship or not ship certain things and what is the direction we'd like to push Blink to. And hopefully we can use part of this BlinkOn to come to a shared vision as a Blink team.
And understand your vision as well. So the big why, at least for the last year, has been mobile. Mobile has been a huge change for this project, and I know many people in this room have long been thinking about mobile before it became popular in Blink, but it's a big deal for us right now. And one of really what's driving that is this change in how users are consuming your code. It is no longer that users are using your code on Windows. Well, they are still today, but that is declining. And users are increasingly using your code more and more and more on devices. And unfortunately, our code in this room doesn't actually work as well as it should or as well as it could on these devices.
But so this slide also shows that there's a huge opportunity, right? So that there's a lot of change going on currently, this shift towards mobile, and it's on the one hand it's scary, right? So it's like unknown and new to us at least. But it's also at the same time it's a huge opportunity. Like we have the freedom to define to a certain extent where this should be going, what should be the mobile web experience there.
We throw this other slide in to address. There's also some prevailing pessimism, I think, on the web, circulating through blogs about the question of mobile versus, or I'm sorry, web versus native. I'm not sure that's as direct conflict as it's been pitched, but I think that I look at graphs like this and I see opportunity. I see mobile is exploding. We're not doing as good a job at providing the web for mobile as we could be, but we have 86% of user time to grab in the future.
Yeah. And if you put this graph in context of the previous graphs, that mobile devices are exploding, then maybe the 14% in 2014 are actually way more than the 20% in 2013, right? So that's kind of, so you have to take the graph with a grain of salt. But so if you want to put it in a very extreme way, right? So if mobile eats the world, like we are going away from desktop, shifting towards mobile, and at the same time mobile web is declining, then in the extreme this could mean that the web becomes irrelevant, right? Because there's no desktop web anymore. We're shifting towards mobile, and at the same time native apps are on mobile and not the web. So this really brings us to we must be relevant, and we means the web, right? The mobile web must be relevant, but also we as Blink or as browser platform must be relevant.
I don't think anyone in this room believes in that dystopian future, but it is definitely a concern. This appropriately came out yesterday. This is the latest XKCD.
And so basically this is a very positive thing, right? So the web has a number of very unique advantages which you do not have on native mobile. Just to name a few, it's like indexability, security by default, right? You don't have these scary persistent permissions you have to install. You just go to some website and it works reasonably well. It's composability, ephemeral. So all these unique advantages of the web are not present currently in mobile, and so we have the opportunity to just make our platform suck less on mobile, and people will come running to us.
Yes, we need to just suck less. So we've talked a little bit about our high-level motivation. Obviously, is mobile. We have a bunch of challenges that we wanted to bring up and talk with you about. Obviously, mobile is a big piece of our thinking. How does the web stay relevant? How does Blink stay relevant? Are we doing enough for mobile? These are all big questions for us.
Right. So, and it's important. It's not just a shift from desktop to mobile. Like we're not just adjusting our direction, but it's really about setting a new focus. Right? It's a new platform. It's not just a tiny desktop without a keyboard, but it's like a mobile web which we need to invest into. And the question is, are we doing enough? Are we doing the right thing? Right? And so there are some studies that look into why do developers not target mobile, or what keeps them from using like our platform. And it turns out, and most of the studies, and it aligns with what we experienced during hacking on Blink, is that performance is the #1 blocker. Right? So the #1 reason people are going towards native is performance. Right? And I mean, I, for example, have like a Nexus 5, I think. It's really nice, but that's not the majority of our users, right? So a mobile device is like 10x slower. and still we want to deliver high quality experience there. But it's not just performance. There's also feature gap, so you can't access certain device APIs which you can access on native. There's tooling. There's certainly also a part around monetization and education. So if you look at some of the projects, for example, there are at least 3 distinct teams that try to address performance. But there are also teams that try to bridge the feature gap. We're trying to improve the platform by making it more intuitive and easier to develop on this platform.
And we should mention that all of these efforts are all open source, some of which overlap directly with Blink, some of which are separate projects. But these are all efforts that Google is contributing towards addressing these pain points that we experience when we write mobile apps at Google, and other developers experience as well.
Yeah. So this list is not supposed to be like the exhaustive list of important projects. It's more trying to give examples of how we try to address each of these points. And like when you think about what you're working on or what you focus on, then we encourage you to also evaluate them based on these issues, like how does it actually solve the problems we have on mobile. And it doesn't mean you should drop whatever you're doing and join the speed team, but it means that these are good things to evaluate your focus against.
And I think you'll see that reflected in the sessions held these days. So another challenge, the mobile web is very much, I believe, in its infancy, and is a great potential for us to steer the way and have explosive growth. And a question for us is, how do we move the web forward enough to respond to these changing expectations in developers, changing expectations in users, make the web attractive to write for in the same ways that Cocoa is attractive to write for on iOS, for example.
Right. And the question is also forward in which direction, right? So and the good thing is that we can actually decide this, or we can make up an opinion which way we want to go.
Another challenge for us is we're moving really fast in terms of rate of change. We have 240 people actively contributing to this project. You write a lot of code, make a lot of changes. We're trying to move the web faster. We're trying to change the APIs exposed to the web faster, but that has the risk of fragmenting the web. That has the risk of taking away from our compatibility story, which is such a large part of our platform's.
And just to make this clear, I mean, we're moving fast. We want to move even faster, but it's a complete anti-goal to create a Blink-only web, right? So we're trying to be in the driver's seat. We're trying to lead, but we want to lead the pack, right? So we want to move forward as a platform.
We need to be able to ship things and not take 3 years to ship something that another platform has had for 15 years. But we also need to not steer ourselves off a cliff or into a corner.
And at the same time, moving forward also means to leave at least parts of your past behind. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, it's still an unsolved question. How can we remove parts of the platform which we do not like? At which speed can we remove parts of the platform? We had to realize that there are parts of browser users that just live in a different time frame. So an enterprise, they might have to support some setup for like 5 years. And after this, they're happy to change to whatever new APIs we have, but they need the time to make this transition. But at the same time, if you just stand by and are like, okay, on desktop we're good enough, we'll just continue doing this, then somebody else will fill this gap, right? So we're already seeing now that some of the native frameworks try to bring some of the distinct advantages of the web platform to native. And if we just stand back and wait for this to happen, we might lose a real opportunity there.
It's not bad. Obviously, these things are good for users, but we have this bag of technology. Why can't users use it? They want to use it. We just need to get out of their way. So another challenge for us is complexity. We alluded to this, talked about this earlier. We have 240 contributors last month. That's a lot of people. And if we merge with Chromium, that's a lot more people. We need to make it really easy to change in our code in order to survive at that scale.
And when we forked almost more than a year ago, we also lost a lot of knowledge about the code base, right? And so it's important. We're still in this process of taking ownership of all of the code base. And I'd really like us to go in the direction where we don't have like individual kingdoms, where just a group of experts is able to work on this code, or there's just a few of Adam Barth that are able to actually restructure the code base. But it really needs to be the entire Blink community that takes on ownership of the code base. And that can mean that we make stuff that was previously implicit, we make it explicit. We put in APIs that make it easy to reason about the code base. It really should be the case that everybody feels empowered to do fundamental changes to the code base, that reorder stuff that make it better, easier to understand. You mentioned earlier we will merge at some point with Chromium. It means that potentially there's like 3x more people that will hack on our code base, and in order to grow as fast as we did, or even grow faster, we really need to invest into managing this complexity and become more hackable.
So we also want to talk a little bit about, at least our opinions, about how we can help move forward. Because we got a lot of manpower here, or person power, and where can we put that effort? So the biggest thing for us, and Nat is going to give a talk after this one entirely about this, the biggest complaint that we get from developers trying to develop for the mobile web is performance. And obviously not everyone's going to work on performance, but we still need a lot of help here. And personally, I spend a lot of time working on performance. I would say if you take away nothing else from BlinkOn, if you learn the existence of and how to use the about tracing tool, that is our best tool for understanding performance on mobile to date, that alone will be a win, because your code will be that much more performant.
And I think there's a separate session where Nat will walk through diagnosing one of the problem, or some performance problem, I don't know which, with about tracing. There's also a number of queries for our bug tracker, which you can look at open bugs if you want help.
Yep. But if you have an Android cable and a laptop, you can trace today. Very, very interesting to see where the time goes. So another area where we need help is modularity. And we gave these same slides 6 months ago, and a lot has actually changed. The dream has become true to a large extent. So this is where we had hoped to go, and platform is separate. Core no longer depends on modules. We're nearly to this vision. The one last remaining piece is that binding sitting above modules and above core is a lie. Binding also has some pieces that are below core and creates a sandwich in which you can't separate the three. But we have a team in Tokyo working on exactly that problem, and I'm sure they would be happy to have your help. And there may be a session on that today, for all we know. But anyways, this is a big issue. Continuing to divide our code base into digestible pieces is a very important part of maintaining and accelerating our growth. If we're successful there, there's even more we can go. And again, this is the same slide we gave 6 months ago. We can further break up core, which we've done some. We've broken a lot of things out into modules. We'd like to break more.
I mean, it will help with compile time. Having APIs will help with understanding the code base. And once we can actually break out modules, you can also pick and choose what you compile in. It's no longer just a runtime thing, but you can say, okay, this feature I do not need on like my microwave. Still want a browser, so you can compile it out.
There's again been a ton of dependency work that's gone on slowly. This is very chipping at the iceberg kind of work. Cores is now free of modules, binding split, and we have a ton more modules than we did a year ago, which is great. This is all very good news. So, to talk about what we've talked about. We had 2 big themes today. The first was growth. The project is growing, continuing to grow, and it's important. It's important to us to prepare for that growth and to continue to support that growth with things like modularity and documentation and.
Yeah, we would like to even grow faster, and we will, right? So there will be the merge, and we hopefully get a ton of new contributors that before primarily worked on Chromium. And in order to sustain this growth and not die from it, we need to invest in ourselves, in our infrastructure, drive down code complexity, take on ownership of the code. Right. And so the second theme is mobile. And I want to highlight it. It's not just we are also supporting mobile in addition to desktop, but we're not treating it as just a small crappy desktop. It's a new platform. We need to understand this and drive forward mobile web.
It's where your code is running, and so we have to understand it. So I think that covered most of what we wanted to talk about. We have a bit of time yet. Also, we're doing this again in November, this time in the States.
The first week of November.
And we'd like you to come if you can. Hopefully we'll have more capacity there. It's a much bigger office. And we plan to keep doing this, alternating between the stateside and somewhere abroad. And next year we'd like to be somewhere in APAC.
So. I'm really happy to see so many people coming here. Like in the one pager, it still says that we expect this to be kind of smaller, but we completely are at capacity, so we could have been even more. And it's great, and it's also a great opportunity for us to hear a different set of voices. It's not just the Bay Area people speaking all the time, but it's really your BlinkOn here. So please tell us.
So I think we have some time.
Yes.
Either way, we can either, if you have questions, we're happy to take questions now. We can also take a break and regroup for Nat's talk at 11:15.
So tomorrow there will also be a panel. Max sent around a moderator link where you can put in questions, but of course we'll also take live questions.
Yeah. We also have a bunch more slides we could talk about performance, etc. But I think that's largely going to be covered by other sessions. So, are there questions we can answer now? Well, we have one question.
So if the web platform is going to be like the major platform for apps, I guess the user has to be able to start them as applications from their home screen and make them look like apps because the web browser UI has traditionally been very awkward on mobile. So do you have any thoughts about that, or is that more like the Chromium?
Yes, we have to do things like that. Thankfully, there are lots of people at Google who are thinking about exactly that question. Who are probably
do you think anything we have to do in Blink to support that, or?
I mean, we do need to do things in Blink like the manifest work that's going on right now, the service worker work, to provide ways for the rest of the system that wants to interact with us as an app to be able to do so without booting up the whole rest of the stack, etc. Yeah. So yes, we do need to do work in that. I think that some of that will be covered in other sessions today. But yes.
So there was also this theme of platform versus user agent. Like you just mentioned, the browser UI is kind of destroying the app feeling. You go to some site and you get an info bar where you want to translate the page, and there's a UL bar at the top, and hardly any application space left in between. So for the platform, you basically want to provide the entire thing, but then the user agent has to make some choices, like pointing out that it's actually a UL and not something like in case it wants to, it's a malware. So it is a balance, and it's certainly that the case that both Blink and Chromium and the system you're running on has to somehow work together to solve this problem.
There's also some change that's happening when we merge. Then there's a question of maybe it's not BlinkOn 3, maybe it's ContentCon 3. I mean, our responsibilities as stewards of the web platform are going to expand here very quickly when we no longer have a repository divide, artificial repository divide between us and the rest of the code that's necessary to compile and run the web platform.
Yeah.
Are there other questions before we break? Great. Well, we will see you all at 11:15.